Brewster here with Brewster's Millions of Rants, and this is using delay effects. And I have talked a little bit about gear and different tones, different amps, and some different things on this channel. But now we're going to talk about delay, and delay is a very exciting and useful, very inspiring, effect that you can use. And I don't use a lot of effects on my guitar, but I do prefer, I think, time-based effects, delay and reverb, more than modulation effects. I do use a little bit of phaser, but I don't really use chorus or flange. I don't really use a lot of tremolo. Occasionally I'll use like a univibe. I do like wah. Obviously I like distortion and buzz and overdrive and stuff like that. But this lesson's going to focus on delay and getting some different ideas and different sounds, and we're going to look at some different songs and different ways to use this very, useful effect. Before we get too carried away here, I do have a book with Hal Leonard. It's actually my second book I ever had published, Introduction to Guitar Tone and Effects, and that book talks about tone, pedals, rack-mounted gear, hooking up, to a computer and recording and stuff like that. Talks about the order of effects, like on a pedal board. So, I'm proud of that book because it's, one of my published books. But if anybody out there has any questions or you want to dive a little bit deeper, check out my book, Introduction to Guitar Tone and Effects. And then as far as what delay pedals I have in my studio, I do have a mini carbon copy from MXR, the Echo 6 Baby from Fox Gear. And I recently picked up a JHS Series 3 delay, which is a great pedal. But here's an image with my 3 delay pedals that I kind of bounce around between. As I mentioned, I recently picked up a JHS Series 3 delay pedal, and this thing is killer. For $99, you can switch between digital and analog delay. It has settings from 80 milliseconds to 800 milliseconds. And it's a well-made, inexpensive, pedal option for delay. And, it's not a mini size, but it doesn't take up a lot of space on your pedal board. And like I said, for $99, there's a lot of bang for the buck. Great pedal. The most basic application for delay is just causing a repeat to happen. You have this kind of echo effect. And there's tons of examples of this. You could listen to a lot of old rockabilly and some country and some stuff like that. But when I think of that kind of slap back, bounce, I think of Flying High Again, Randy Rhoads. And I think of songs like Walking on the Moon by the Police. And you can hear, the slap back delay. With that chord, you'll hear Sting play the bass line. And then you hear Andy Summers literally just strum this. It's a D minor 11. Kind of hear that echo repeat in there. But he's not doing that, he's letting it ring. And then you hear the... So I'm trying to play the bass and guitar at the same time, but that's literally what Andy played right there. And you just kind of hear that repeated, echo of that chord. And I think most people would agree the undisputed king of using delay is the Edge from U2. And there's other players too, David Gilmour and Van Halen. But the Edge has always had this just signature kind of approach to using delay, and that dotted eighth, kind of delay rhythm. And, think of songs like Bad from the Unforgettable Fire, and you'll hear stuff like this. Piece of A sus4 to A major, and he's grabbing that high E way up there. But you can definitely hear the repeats with the delay. Those repeats in there. And then he's moving to like a D9 and then a D5 right there. Picking between that D and A note. Something like that. a big one, Run Like Hell from Pink Floyd, and Gilmour's using delay with these, kind of partial chords and little triads, but it creates this hypnotic, ambient kind of effect like this. Walking down D major, it's an A over D, and then you'll hear then it's a G over D to D major, and you'll hear that part there, and then an A over D right there, so it's A over D to G over D. And then a D sus2 to D major. The song that opened this lesson, that's In a Daydream by Freddy Jones Band, a very obscure song from the 90s. And unless you're from Chicago or you went to college in the 90s, you may not know that song, but it's a really cool one. And he's basically doing this. Sorts of lead and fills. It just keeps going. There's all sorts of stuff happening in that song. But with the opening, it's basically, he's flirting with this. Kind of a variation of the Run Like Hell chords. Run Like Hell we had D major, and then A over D to G over D. But with this, we're basically starting, with kind of a modified different chord here. So you can think of that as like a D9, with that E note on top. And then you hear that, A over D move to that G over D. Kind of stays on that G over D. There's kind of a percussive strum, and then he strums it again like this. Now I like the way the chords bounce with that delay. It's really cool. Starts doing this little fill, kind of goes into the verse right there, but that's basically D major pentatonic, because you're doing this, but you want to catch the repeats at the right time, so you get that ping pong kind of bouncy sound right there. Now the pioneer for using delay effects, with lead guitar ideas is Brian May from Queen. And check out the live version of Brighton Rock and you'll hear something like this. Himself on all these delay repeats, and they starting with this, like the low E. There's like an E7 sus4 chord right there. playing like the low E open and the octave above. Like the delay is literally taking those repeats. Then he starts kind of like blending, you know, that octave with the rest of the chord, that E5. And letting it just kind of blur and bounce and repeat all into itself. And then you hear this descending. Delay, you know, he harmonized with himself, which is so cool, and that's just really walking down like a partial E minor scale. But you can start playing scales and licks, you know, using delay and just see what happens. Now for an outside-the-box idea using delay, check out the song Big Sur Moon from Buckethead on his album Coma, and you'll hear something wicked like this. He's literally just kind of using delay, and it's creating this hypnotic, you know, bouncy, repetitive sound, but it's really a riff. So he's really just grabbing, you know, B, F sharp, then E, F sharp, D, F sharp, C sharp, F sharp. So it's kind of this little pedal tone kind of thing, but you want to find the rhythm, you know, between the repeats with your delay. Palm muting pretty heavy, and it's a very staccato kind of piece. Because you don't want the notes you're playing to ring, you know, because then it's going to blur into the repeats. You want to cut it really short so you can hear those repeats. And then move down. You're basically playing the same kind of thing, but now with the G root. But really staccato. Then grab B flat right here. And then B natural. You know, really interesting guitar part. Then you hear this crazy, what's like a B minor 9 arpeggio. So check that one out. Here's another big one. This is Cathedral from Van Halen. And I know when I first heard this song, I think most people probably agree, I thought it was a keyboard or something. I had no idea, like a cello or something. And then when I saw footage of Van Halen playing this on a guitar, you know, it blew my mind all over again. I thought, what is he doing? And of course I was instantly hooked on delay as soon as I saw that. But the first thing you want to do before you start doing the swells, you know, with your volume control, you want to set the delay for the right tempo or the right speed. So it's somewhere around 395 milliseconds, you know, with one really good repeat or echo. And, you know, I'm just going to finger pick for this. You could use a pick too. But just think of a B major bar chord right here and just pick through it instead of doing the volume swells to make sure it's moving like with the delay in the right tempo. That way you can kind of check your delay before you start doing this. C sharp, and then it's E flat major right here. And then E flat F to G major. And then G to A to B major. And then go from B back to A, back down to G major. And then down to D major, F major, C major, and this little piece of a G major triad, and then just walk back down to B. But then the real trick is the volume knob, right? Tricky because you have to time it just at the right time. You don't want to be too early or too late when you get those swells, you know, with your volume control in there. The last song here, this is another obscure one. This is Hina from the David Lee Roth album Skyscraper. So this is Steve Vai on guitar, and Steve dialed up this really bouncy kind of slapback echo effect for this rhythm part like this. Just grooving off this E5 and occasionally grabs that 7th fret bar behind it like that. And I like that bouncy kind of effect it has with that delay, because the repeats are kind of getting in the way of the strums, but it works. Partial E slid down to a partial C. It's like a C over E or C5 over E. And then a partial D to a partial A, and then he opens up the B and the high E, so that's kind of like an A9 right there. Guitar part, and I love that bouncy, crazy delay in there. Really cool. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Brewster's Millions of Rants with using delay effects. And honestly, I had a lot of songs picked out for this episode. This episode could have been like an hour or two long because I had so many examples. Different bands, different eras. I was going to look at, you know, like early stuff like rockabilly and stuff like that too. I just didn't get around, you know, I ran out of time basically. I didn't want to make, you know, a 3-hour video or whatever. So there's tons of other examples of using delay and slapback and echo, and you know, there's tons of examples of this. So it's out there, and I know it's one of those things that you hear it, whether it's on the radio or in concert or something, or you know, on an album or whatever, and you hear it, and you know, you can pick out certain things where it's like, yeah, that's delay, or that's like the slapback kind of echo. And then other times you'll hear it being used, and your ear might get confused. You might not be able to recognize what it actually is, because it might be delay, you know, in combination with other effects, or maybe it's like, you know, buried in the mix or something weird's going on. All I know is if I'm feeling like I'm in a rut or I'm kind of doing a lot of the same things, you know, if I hook up something like delay or maybe some wah or whatever, it really does shake things up where I'm not depending on these normal things that I might do. It does kind of open this like different door, you know, for experimenting and trying some different things. You know, maybe like diving into some Pink Floyd or some Dream Theater or something, and you'll find, you know, delay being used all over the place. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Net Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content material. Thank you.